We continue to follow breaking news out of the Middle East after the United States and Israel launched coordinated strikes on Iran. Explosions have been reported across Tehran, including near offices linked to Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Joining us now to discuss more about the attack is our Washington correspondent, Reggie Cicchini. So, Reggie, what do we know at this hour about these joint strikes targeting Iran? What are the main targets?
Hey there, Jasmine. So, look, this was not a surprise. We've seen that massive military buildup in and around Iran for the last several weeks. And just yesterday, we saw the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem put out a call to non-emergency personnel to leave Israel as quickly as they could, suggesting something was coming. And then these overnight strikes, according to the U.S., are targeting various different regions across Iran, namely its military assets, trying to go after its ballistic missile program, trying to go after sites that may have been attacked during the strikes that took place in the summer of 2025. The U.S. And Israel carried this out jointly, as you said. Israel has been far more forward-leaning with its intentions in this war, suggesting that it is targeting Iranian leadership with some satellite imagery suggesting that the compound where the supreme leader would live was struck by one of these missiles. It's unclear the extent of damage or the extent of any casualties here, but this does suggest that, well, the Americans are trying to limit or annihilate the ability for Iran to continue to defend itself and potentially carry out threats around the world and specifically throughout the region. Iran is also leaning into a potential here for regime change. So this is something that is likely going to have a far more broad impact than what we saw last year with the 12-day strikes.
And Reggie, Trump has claimed that Iran continued to develop its nuclear program and planned to develop missiles to reach the U.S. Can you expand on that claim?
Right. And look, we've heard this from the president. We have heard this from Secretary of State Marco Rubio earlier this week, suggesting how even though sanctions are on the country, they seem to have this money to be able to put into the ballistic missile program. And we've also heard this from U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who claimed that within a matter of days, it may have been possible for Iran to have come up with some kind of weapon that could be launched potentially at a U.S. military asset in the region. The issue here, Jazin, is that U.S. Intelligence assessments over the last several weeks, if not the last several months, don't line up with the comments that are coming from the president. And these are comments that were also spoken during Donald Trump's State of the Union. The U.S. Defense Intelligence assessments here suggest that it could still take upwards of a decade for Iran to be able to get itself some kind of weapon that could be launched, possibly an ICBM, towards U.S. territory. And that's because they suffered such significant damage to military missile sites last year with those strikes between the U.S. and Iran. So this is a question as to whether the facts are lining up with reality. And if they are not, there could be potential further questions here about the reason that the United States is carrying out these strikes in the first place. Because if the missile capabilities weren't there, this is going to lean into questions. Is the U.S. simply trying to potentially weaken the regime or carry out some kind of regime change?
Yeah, and to all this, Trump has asked the Iranian people to take over their government, and Netanyahu now says the operation is to create conditions in which the Iranian people can, quote, create their own fate. So what does that look like? What are some of the challenges the Iranian people can expect to face?
Well, I mean, look, regime change in the best case of scenario is oftentimes dangerous and difficult and not always a guarantee. And if the United States is playing a role in regime change, history suggests that there can oftentimes be problems with that. All you have to do is take a look at Middle East operations that the United States has been involved in over the last 20 years, including in Iraq. I was speaking with former White House national security experts this week who said that in the event of a regime change, whether it winds up being a military coup or something with civilians, there's always the risk that a power vacuum shows up and the wrong leader, the wrong group of people can be installed, and that can become problematic down the line. Experts have said there needs to be a clear plan here if the U.S. is pushing to go further than just weaken the regime and have somebody else come in place. I mean, look, we saw, an uprising with protests earlier in the year in Iran, and they were kind of met with a bloody crackdown. Even if the regime is weakened, there is still a military infrastructure. There is still a political, tower that exists in Iran that can try to push back, even under the threat of ongoing strikes from the U.S. or from Israel, depending on how long these strikes ultimately go. So there is a call here for, something to happen within the kind of political structure within Iran. It's not clear what that's going to look like, but there have been calls from around the world, standing by what the U.S. and Israel are doing, suggesting that Iran is a producer of terror, that Iran is a problem throughout the region. But again, without a plan, it's not quite clear what the people of Iran can do on their own.
Mm-hmm. Can you expand more on how the Iranian government immediately responded to this attack?
Yeah, look, we have seen a significant response from Tehran and a far bigger response than we saw in 2025. The Iranian regime says that they are kind of firing on all cylinders here and they are well prepared to push back. And last year during the strikes, we saw a significant number of drones fired towards Israel. That is the same thing that we've seen this year. We've seen a couple of different waves of drones fired out of Iran towards Israel. Much of them have been met with kind of a response, either from the Iron Dome or from the Israeli Air Force. But there's also been a far more regional impact here. We've seen American military bases in Bahrain struck. We have seen missiles launched towards Qatar and towards the United Arab Emirates. In the UAE, officials there say one person died as a result of debris falling from one of the missiles that had been taken down. And that's where some of the concern here was, Jason, that anything that the United States and Israel did towards Iran risked turning into something more regional, and it becomes more problematic here because there are so many military bases owned by the United States in the region. It risks expanding this far beyond. So we have seen, several volleys of retaliation coming from the Iranian government over the last several hours. The regime says that this is going to continue as long as the U.S. and Israel are continuing this, leading it to the question of, is this going to be something that wraps up quickly, or does this wind up becoming some kind of protracted war?
Mm-hmm. And lastly, let's talk about the international response. How are Americans feeling, and has Canada responded?
Right. So we've heard from Prime Minister Mark Carney in a statement saying that he stands by what the United States and Israel are doing, suggesting that this is a way to bring down the terror level from within Iran, but at the same time exercising restraint, fearful that this could, further go beyond just the region and become a far more globalized war. European leaders have been watching this cautiously, again calling for a de-escalation in tensions. In the United States, some members of the Republican Party are lauding this effort by Donald Trump to go forward. But there are Democrats who are saying that this is the wrong move, especially because we heard Donald Trump in his statement overnight suggest that there is a risk here that American lives could be lost. And if we go back to 2024, Donald Trump ran a campaign on keeping the United States out of war, particularly in the Middle East, where there is a tendency for these wars to become drawn out and it becomes more difficult to leave. And if there is a loss of American life, that could become a political risk for the Republican Party in a midterm year. So again, this push to exercise restraint is coming from international leaders. It is coming from some domestic calls in the United States. And it's worth pointing out that the leaders in Finland this morning, Jason, have said that the United States is acting out of tradition. Normally, this kind of a strike would at least be done in coordination with the United Nations or with American allies. And at least to now, it seems like very few people were actually pulled into the loop.
All right, Reggie, thanks for all that. That is our Washington correspondent, Reggie Cecchini.